Hi, this is Summer. Today we'll talk about defense buffs, mainly defense generals, but the ideas apply broadly. So there are a lot of guides and comparisons out there, and I don't intend to repeat much, but to add more nuance that is often overlooked or not analyzed properly. Many comparisons, like this one, just add the buffs and rank generals that way. It's useful, but it misses how troop composition affects the real impact of each buff. Also, I see arguments like this quite often. Some argue Boudica isn't good if you have a T1 mounted wall because flats matter more. But flats come from refinements and some other sources, not from generals. So that logic doesn't apply. So the real question here is how do different types of percentage buffs compare? Is ranged attack more important or mounted HP, for example? So it is true that percentage buffs add very little to T1 stats. A 20% attack buff, which goes down to 10% if it is fully debuffed, adds only 10 units to a T1 mounted attack. Very insignificant. But that's for one single troop. If you have 1 billion T1s, that becomes a total of 10 billion attack added to your total stats. This doesn't look like a small number. If you take your troop formation or keep build, it has some strengths and some weaknesses. Generally, it is more effective to boost its strengths. They define how your keep fights best. For example, we focus on T1 mounted to take advantage of their high durability. Now let's take the same example as before, a K39 style keep with 500 million T1 mounted, 100 million T1 ground and archers, and light layers totaling about 3.6 billion power. High tiers are more archer heavy. So now, if you look at the total troop stats of this keep without buffs, it looks like this. Mounted is contributing the most, especially its HP, that is the highest, but also its attack. Then ground HP and defense are also rather high. So now let's use this newest defense general that costs more than I want to know and apply all of its skill buffs, specialty, and covenant buffs. These are the totals. He adds a lot to archers and siege, great for rearguard attack and very good for the rest. When you apply this to the keep we saw, this is how things change. The dotted bars are after the buffs are applied. As you can see, the overall composition doesn't change. Archer attack and HP is now much higher than before, but so is everything else. Still, mounted HP and attack and ground HP are the dominant stats. So it's not very obvious if this is better than a general that adds more to mounted HP instead. So I did a comprehensive comparison of 7 generals across 6 different troop formations. I also did a battle simulation to see how things work out considering other things in battle dynamics like attacking order. So Yu does great for rearguard attack and Boudica for vanguard durability. If we sum up these two or take the average, Yu comes out on top and Boudica goes down to the 4th place. The issue with this approach is that it assumes rearguard attack and vanguard HP durability are equally important. But as we saw, HP simply makes a much bigger share of a keep stats. So in this last metric, I add up the rearguard attack and vanguard durability before and after applying buffs and calculate how much it increases. This gives the two a relative weight that corresponds to the initial keep build. Here, Boudica turns out as the best general. The reason is that the increase in mounted HP, which is applied to a huge number of troops, adds more units of stats than the higher percentages applied to 9 million high tier archers. Now, if we look at all troop stats, we see a similar pattern. Here, Boudica is the best also in the average of attack and durability. If we double the T1 mounted to 1 billion, naturally, that Vanguard durability goes even higher, especially for Boudica. This is what the comparisons look like if we keep 500 million T1s but Ghost High tier mounted. Now, if there's no T1 wall, so there's just 1 million T1s per type, Boudica's advantage goes down, but interestingly, still ends up adding more absolute stats. But if you also ghost the mounted troops, you are left with barely any mounted, so now you, Taylor, Marshall, and Richard the Lionheart are all better. Now let's look at a heavy 21 billion keep with 2 billion troops across all types that looks like this. 500 million T1 mounted, 250 million ground, thick 10 million layers up to T15s. You can see the comparison doesn't change a lot. Of course, U goes up and Boudica drops, especially when you look at total stats, but not as much as one might expect. In all of these comparisons, how we value these two in the final decision seems to make a big difference. So let's take a closer look and simulate a battle. I tried to extend Derek Defy Simulator to include two layers on one side, 500 million T1 mounted and 9 million T13 archer on the defense. For defense, I add 100% buffs either to mounted attack or HP or to rear or to range attack. The attacker has no buffs and it is attacking with a single layer. I consider solo and rally. It's not real rally dynamics. It's just a 3 million T13 layer for solo and 20 million T13s for rally. This is the summary of different scenarios. I take the case of no buffs as the baseline and calculate the percentage change for the 3 buff scenarios. Let's focus on rallies. Against archers, range attack buff allows you to kill more, but so does mounted HP, although a bit less. Your mounted layer survives for more rounds and you get extra chances to attack the enemy. Against a mounted rally, mounted attack does slightly better than archer attack. Against ground, it does significantly better, and against siege, they are quite similar, but mounted HP does a bit better. So overall, mounted percentage buffs do help a lot. Even HP eventually translates to more kills because your troops survive more to deal more damage. If you consider all of the layers in the battle, the ranged buffs would gain more value because their higher range allows them to avoid taking damage for multiple rounds. Now going back to this, we only looked at the main buffs so far. Once you include base stats and cultivation, the gap between generals becomes very small. If we also add 80% of possible equipment flat buffs for mounted, the gaps nearly disappear. So they all do pretty well. The point is about your defense buff strategy. So focus first on a strong troop setup, then try to boost its main strengths. That's the most effective defensive strategy overall. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.